Hey, welcome to another episode of Two Old Bloggers with your host, Darren, and me, Dave. In today's episode, we're going to take you on a journey through the Minnesota Vikings' quest for Super Bowl greatness. A journey we're calling Eclipsing Expectations. As the cosmos unfolds, casting a shadow across the land, we'll delve deep into the cosmic convergence of the events that may lead to the Vikings to their long-awaited glory. We'll dive into the rich history of the 7-round draft, focusing particularly on the pivotal position of the quarterback. From franchise legends to missed opportunities, we'll analyze the stars that have aligned or perhaps misaligned in some cases in shaping the Vikings' quarterback legacy. We'll also shift our focus to the crucial defensive position of the Vikings' cornerbacks. Just like the perfect alignment of the sun and the moon during an eclipse, we'll assess the strength and weaknesses and potential rising stars in the position. So join us as we peer into the future and envision a defense that shines as brightly as the sun after an eclipse. Buckle up and join Two Old Bloggers starting now. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. The known glitch. You should hear us now. That's frustrating sometimes, but thank you, Nick. I want to thank Nick, Norsefius, Raymond, Doc Proto, Przemysław, hope I said your name right, Delton, Raymond, everybody that's here so far, Mr. Bob Swede, Gary Olson, welcome one and all to the show. Darren, how's things in the Great White North?
Not bad. Said the sun is shining, snow is melting, getting warmer, and we're getting close to draft night. So looking forward to that.
Yep. Delton, it's not a sound check issue. It's a transition from the roll-in scene into the main scene. It stays on mute for some reason. And it's only in this show, and I have not figured out what's causing it. Thank you, Norsefius. But it is what it is. Now, today I used Eclipsing Expectations and the Vikings' journey to a Super Bowl. It's been a long time between full total eclipses. Now, we've had a couple here in the States recently, but it's a long time that Austin's not had one, and it's like another 200 years or whatever it is till the next one. So we're going to enjoy this tomorrow. I've got my glasses all ready. Can't see shit through them, but I guess that's the point. If I get the chance to see it, because it's supposed to be cloudy and starting to rain about that time. We'll see. Hopefully there's magic and it does not happen. The clouds part and I get to see a complete total eclipse. That would be cool. I've seen a partial. I have not seen a complete. So let's get this going. Because the eclipse is rare, we have a rare chance to move the Vikings to someplace they've never been. And we're going to start off with theme 1. And in theme 1, we're talking this week in Vikings land.
Sort of this week in Vikings land, I guess. Before we get to we'll get to the quarterback talk in this segment as well, Dave, a little bit later on. But before we get to that, wanted to touch on the kickoff rule change just for a bit. I think most everybody on here knows what that rule change means and how it all is going to work. It's going to drastically change the amount of kickoff returns there's going to be. Rich McKay, who's on the NFL competition committee, figures it'll 50 to 60% of kickoffs will be returned this year with the new rule changes. And that is a sizable jump from last year, 2023. And I'm pretty sure if you look back in previous years, the return percentages would be pretty similar. But last year, only 21% of kickoff returns kickoffs were returned. And so that is a huge difference. And if you've got a really good kickoff returner, Dave, and a strong blocking special teams unit, that your team might even return more kickoffs than 50 to 60%, which brings us to Kene Nwangwu, Wang Chung, as we call him in the Gallhorn website. Maybe not everybody calls him that, but we do on that site. And Kene Nwangwu is an excellent kickoff returner, but the fact is that this kickoff return rule probably it's good news for Kene Nwangwu. I think it's good news for the Vikings. Good news for Kene Nwangwu because last year in 9 games, first off, Kene Nwangwu, one of the best kickoff returners in the NFL. He's been a backup running back and our primary kickoff returner in the 3 seasons that he's been in the NFL. But he's buried on the depth chart on the running back side of things. And so he basically, kickoff returner is his job, and he's very good at it. 3 kickoff returns to the house in 3 seasons. But last year, but the kickoff return rules have really made him almost irrelevant, certainly as a player. Certainly last year, he was injured quite a bit. He appeared in 9 games. He only got to return 15 kickoffs, which is not even 2 a game. There were many games that he played where he didn't get to return any kickoffs, Dave's. They were all touchbacks.
Yeah, so he'd sit there and watch him go, and he always looked very depressed when that happened. And he'd like walk to the sidelines, not even jog. You're like, there was my chance to shine. It's another touchback. But anyway, I digress a little bit. So I'm pretty sure that Kene Nwangwu, with the old kickoff return rules, he was going to be probably cut. He might be a roster cut because he doesn't appear to have a future as a running back, even though he's super fast. Has had very few carries in his 3 seasons in the league, and at least in Minnesota, it's really, if the guy has one job and he never gets to do it, then are you going to use up a roster spot on him, or would you rather use it for somebody else who's going to play more in various roles? Now, Nwangwu does play on the coverage units in some areas, but still, he wasn't getting a whole lot of play. But now these kickoff return, Dave's rule changes are going to result in they make him and other really good kickoff returners a much more valuable asset and a much more of a weapon for you. And again, good for Nwangwu's career. He's going to get to do much more what he's really good at. But it's also good for the Vikings, Dave, I think, from a field position perspective, because next year, right now, the way it's looking, we've got either potentially Sam Darnold is your quarterback,
or a rookie hot shot. And so that could lead to, so that offense, I think, is going to need every little bit of help it can get as far as field position goes. So now Matt Daniels, the special teams coach that you had up there a little while ago, if he can get to the coverage units, the kickoff return, the blocking really set up well, he finds ways that there's going to be more of an opportunity for Kenny Nwangwu to return. Good blocking with Kenny Nwangwu's abilities, with his speed, with his vision on kickoff returns. You could see Kenny Nwangwu bringing 1-2 kickoff returns to the house this year. And not only that, but just reeling off a lot of long, really positive kickoff returns, which will give the Vikings offense better field position instead of being stuck at the 30 or the 25. It'd be so much better if you're starting at the 35 or the 40 or the 45, even if Kenny Nwangwu doesn't return, every kickoff as a touchdown, which isn't going to happen. But field position is going to be important for the Vikings offense, I think, with the quarterback situation being what it is. And so I think this kickoff return rule, again, it's a big positive for the Vikings considering who they have as a kickoff returner. Some teams don't have a Kenny Nwangwu, not even close. And so that the kickoff return rule is not going to help them as much as I think it's going to help the Vikings.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And just for those that are paying attention to us and didn't catch the end, South Carolina women are your national champions. They defeated Iowa.
There we go. And I was paying attention to it. We'll watch the whole thing until I had to get going on the show here.
Well, I think he's going to have a good season just because of that. And I agree with you. I think Matt Daniels is going to have fun setting up returns. I think the return team is going to get a little bit different composition-wise, and we'll see that develop over the season. But I think it's going to be fun to watch, and I can't wait. Now, that brings us to your next This Week in Vikings Land, and this one isn't as pleasant.
It isn't. We heard that Wes Phillips got suspended without pay for 3 weeks because of DUI arrest that he had back in 2023. Regrettable incident, of course. And I guess the good thing about this is that particularly in the past, certainly since Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah have been GM, the head coach in the past 2+ seasons, but even before that, there haven't been a lot of Vikings who have had legal issues, if you want to put it that way. Whereas in the 1980s and the 1990s, it seemed like the Minnesota Vikings led the league in players or coaches or whatever getting DUIs. That doesn't seem to happen anymore, so that's a positive. But for Phillips, I'm not going to get into whether the crime fits the punishment in this case. It is what it is. But it did get me thinking about Wes Phillips and his role as offensive coordinator with the Minnesota Vikings. And normally, if your offensive coordinator is going to be missing in action for 3 weeks, suspended, not being able to do stuff with the team, especially as you're getting into getting closer to the draft and trying to hone in on particularly that quarterback that we're going to select, this wouldn't be a good thing. But like Wes Phillips to me is a man of mystery, Dave, as far as the offensive coordinator role, because I don't know if it's hard for me based on how the job is doled out offensively, whether what kind of an impact, positive or negative, he has on the Vikings. With Brian Flores, it's clear. With Matt Daniels, it's clear. They're the guys leading their our defense and our special teams. They're calling the plays. They're developing the game plans. Offensively, that isn't the case with Wes Phillips because Kevin O'Connell is the play caller. Kevin O'Connell is heavily like a former quarterback coach, consultant, heavily invested in the offensive side of the ball. And really, the Vikings offense is Kevin O'Connell's offense. It is not Wes Phillips' offense. Now, yes, Phillips is very involved in the game planning and coaching and all of that. But when the Vikings offense, whether it's going real good or it's sucking hard, the credit for that is going to go to Kevin O'Connell, or the discredit is going to go to Kevin O'Connell. It's not going to go to Wes Phillips. So again, I kind of wonder, is Wes Phillips a real asset for us? or is he just a hanger-on, a buddy of Kevin O'Connell in that case? And so this whole thing made me think about that. Last year, Dave, when the Vikings were struggling on offense in the second half, particularly because they were playing quarterbacks who weren't Kirk Cousins, there was a few Viking fans who talked about how it was time, they were kind of advocating that it was time for Kevin O'Connell to maybe hand over the play calling duties to Wes Phillips, and Kevin O'Connell could concentrate on in-game stuff and the team overall. An interesting thought, and that comes up from time to time when an offense is struggling and the head coach is the guy who's calling the plays. People want to change the play caller, but I kind of wish that this will not happen, as I think any time that Kevin O'Connell is the head coach. He's not going to relieve himself of the play calling duties. I think he really enjoys that part of the game, and I think that he thinks it's important that he's involved. But there's some part of me that would like to see Wes Phillips call the plays some of the time. It's an interesting idea. I think Phillips did call plays during some preseason games last year. I seem to remember that, but that's something I would like to see maybe this preseason a bit more, just to kind of get an idea, even though the personnel that Phillips is going to be working with won't be the starters, and there's different things that teams are trying to accomplish in a preseason game compared to a regular season game. But I would like to see Wes Phillips do that a bit more in the preseason and call plays for a whole game, just to kind of see what that would look like. And it would give me a better idea of whether Wes Phillips is a guy who, even if he isn't calling the plays as offensive coordinator, he's still a really damn good coach and really good at his job. And that's something that I'm not clear on, because again, it's hard to tell the overall impact he's having when he's not calling the plays and he's not leading the offense, even though he's the offensive coordinator.
It's going to be interesting to see. Wes is obviously, to me, I think he's part of building all this and building the plan, and then KOC obviously influences that and executes it. How much of that is Wes and how much is KOC, I don't really know. Being a head coach takes a lot of other things to do than just looking at game plans. And I think KOC relies on him to look at game plans. How do I dissect this defense type deal that they're coming up to play? I don't know if that's the case. I hope it's the case. And we need to remember that, one, he was suspended for 3 weeks, which started this last week, and it will be up prior to the draft, which pretty much tells me I think the Minnesota Vikings, for most purposes, have their draft board in place. They're pretty much done figuring out who they want, how they want, and stuff like that. Now, granted, there may still be a few more visits, and they're having everybody come up for the 30 visit here, I think, this week. But it's going to be interesting. I think they've got it mostly in place, so they don't need him. So he's getting 3 weeks off, unpaid vacation type deal. And luckily it's now instead of during the season. Because a lot of these times when these coaches get disciplined, it's during the season, just like a player. Hey, you're going to be suspended for violating PEDs for 3 games. When does those 3 games start? Week 1, 2, and 3, right? Instead of right now during the summer. So I think he's lucky in that. Now, also remember, and this may help what you want to see, Kevin Seifert wrote a little over a week ago that, and he quoted, O'Connell said he spent significant time structuring his coaching staff for the possibility of working with Darnold while also developing a rookie quarterback. O'Connell will transfer some of his weekly responsibilities to offensive coordinator Wes Phillips so that he can spend more time with the quarterbacks alongside new position coach Josh McCown. So I'm wondering if Wes is going to get, all right, now you got to sign which color napkins we buy this week or whatever, BS stuff a head coach has to do. But it also may be that he gets more of that developmental role and play calling at least during the week, so that during practices, KOC and Josh McCown are sitting there one-on-oneing it with whatever quarterback we've got under center, whether it be Donald or whatever rookie hotshot we get, as you called it. So we'll see. But that was Wes Phillips being stupid. And all during this, and I'm sure you saw it, the remarks, and we appreciate it, guys, that you're putting it up there, that Devontae Sweat got busted for a DUI and it released within the last 30 minutes. So that's going to be interesting for him because he's a prime target for the Minnesota Vikings. Hopefully he drops to day 3 now, and we don't have to worry about it. Right, Yogi?
Can't see that happening, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yogi's my mock draft guru in this. Yogi does a great job. And if you haven't seen Yogi's show, go search it out because he does absolutely fantastic. He's got the draft trades nailed. He knows exactly what's needed to get the players we want and need. Now, the next topic in your deal is Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell spreading breadcrumbs.
Yes, of course, lots of talk about the draft in the chat, and thanks to everybody for throwing it down in there. But yes, the assumption that the Kwesi adofo-mensah, our GM, and Kevin O'Connell, I think have been spreading a lot of breadcrumbs out there about how they're going to approach particularly the first round of the NFL draft. And that the assumption has been, particularly when we got the Houston's first rounder, and now we have 2 first rounders, that the Vikings are going to do by whatever means necessary to trade into the top 5 of the draft. And I think what we've been hearing from Kevin O'Connell the last week, he talked about how, that's a possibility, but you need a team, namely the Texans, the Cardinals, or the Chargers, to be complicit in that sort of trade. Kwesi adofo-mensah has talked about how that now that he has the 2 first-round draft picks, that gives them flexibility to trade up because having 2 first-rounders this year is a great starting point for any kind of deal into the top 5. But I think what they've been doing laying the breadcrumbs, I think down there that that is not a fait accompli, as we would say in French, and that and I think that they're doing that because they want to manage fans' expectations. Because I feel that, at least partly, I feel that amongst the Vikings fan base and all what I've been seeing when reading is that right now Viking fans want either Drake May, Jaden Daniels, or JJ McCarthy out of the quarterback prospects, with McCarthy probably being the most likely guy that we will get. And that's the 3 that Viking fans want right now, and expect that Kwesi adofo-mensah will trade up and get. And I also get the sense that Viking fans, for the most part, would feel that drafting Bo Nix or Michael Penix would be a disappointing consolation prize for the Vikings. A settling. And
I don't know if we want to settle. It's like, hey, you really like this girl over there and you want to go for that girl. You want to make her your wife, and then you got to turn around and settle for the one over here.
That's true. But I think with Kwesi adofo-mensah and Kevin O'Connell, that they're making it clear to everybody out there, including NFL teams who will be looking to jockey for position and extract, if they want to trade with the Vikings, extract as much resources out of them as possible, is that I think they're trying to make it clear that that's not a done deal for them, and that you need 2 to tango, but also that, again, the Vikings have a price too that they may not be willing to meet in those trade requests. But I think, the last thing that the Vikings want right now is on that draft night, they make their selection and fans boo their asses off because we don't get Daniels, or we don't get JJ McCarthy, or we don't get Drake May. And so they're emphasizing the last couple of weeks, yes, trading up is a possibility, but we need another team to go to dance with us. And also, we're not going to do it at all costs. So tempering expectations among NFL teams about what the Vikings are willing to do and are going to do, and also amongst the fan base who are really rip-roaring, including you and me, Dave, to see us get that quarterback of the future, and preferably one of those three guys in the picture that you've got up right now.
It's going to be interesting. That's for sure. We have a little less than 3 weeks to find out what happens. There's a lot of talk. The latest rumor is a 3-way trade between us, Arizona, and New England. I don't know how that's going to work. It's going to be interesting to see how it works and how much it costs. And is it worth it? And that brings us to theme 2, baby. All right, for those that don't know, Darren and I have done in the past some very, very deep dives into the draft and other topics that we publish via PDF. This one I did this week, and I was keeping Darren well informed of what I was doing. And we're going to show it here. We're going to be diving in to the draft and quarterbacks in particular. Why? Because obviously that's where we're heading. We just got done talking about it. But let's start off with a little bit of history. This man. I know Vikings fans harbor all sorts of anxiety about quarterback failures, particularly of Christian Ponder. Rick Spielman seemed to have made a rushed decision due to the need for a starting quarterback. And with all the top talent already gone off the board, say your top 4 quarterbacks, Williams, May, JJ, Daniels, gone. Now, it wasn't that back when he did it, but it'd be similar. He suddenly said, oh, shit, I need to grab the next best one. And he did. He grabbed Ponder at number 12. Now, Ponder led us to a playoff victory thanks to this man, Adrian Peterson. And it was a wonderful season to see Adrian come back and do his thing. But Ponder failed to secure a second contract. And, we're like, what? How bad is he? Why did Rick Spielman pick him? Was it out of desperation? That's what we don't want to see here in little over 2.5 weeks. We don't want to see desperation. We want to see a plan. We think there's a plan in place, but we don't want to see it. We don't want to grab somebody like Christian Ponder, who may have been turned out to be an adequate quarterback if he had been drafted later and then brought up and trained, sort of like the Jordan Love thing, sat behind somebody, but he didn't. He was thrown in the fire immediately, and we all got burned by it. So we don't want to repeat that mistake. And Emmer, I think he'd already been in charge. I don't think he was in the triumvirate at that point in time.
I don't think there's a triumvirate, Dave, but I think 2012 was when Spielman became the actual general manager.
Okay, so he would have been before that.
So I think at that point, Leslie Fraser did have some say in personnel.
But it was bad.
Mhm.
Now, how do I judge who's a bust, who's not a bust? And Christian Ponder's an obvious bust in our history. And I'll get to the logic behind it. But part of it comes with, what do I expect from a player? And for that, I use, and have used for years, the CBS breakdown of where a pick is selected. What can we expect from them? Right? And a first rounder, you expect an impact player that's going to be a starter, hopefully a Pro Bowler someday. That's what you expect. Second or third rounder, you expect somebody that can contribute and become a starter. Once you get into day 3, then you have somebody that's draftable, may contribute, may not, somebody you could possibly develop, but most likely won't. But those first 3 rounds, you expect to become a starter and be going on in their careers at some point. Now, whether they're real good at it or not, that's a different story. You expect that with the higher draft picks. Somebody may be drafted in the 3rd round as a quarterback, and he goes on to become an expert clipboard holder eventually, but he has a 20-year career. Now, did the team that drafted him get what they wanted? No, they wanted a starter. They wanted somebody that could take them to the promised land, and they didn't do that. Now, with this scale in mind, when we drafted Jaren Hall last year in the 5th round, to me, he's only expected to serve as a backup or a role player. And he did that his first season. I don't expect anything more out of him. If he actually develops into a long-term backup, that will be a huge success. But as of right now, he's not a bust because he's a 5th rounder. You don't expect that much from him. You're asking too much. There's not that much quality in the draft. And I don't care how much of a guru of a coach you are, it takes talent along with that to develop somebody into an absolute stud. Is Jaren Hall going to be? Doubtful. That's just what it is. But I have no complaints over that. Now, what I did is I took all the PFR numbers, Pro Football Reference, threw them into a spreadsheet. Here's the prettier version of the spreadsheet, and I know you can't read that because it's microscopic. And I crunched them. Now, the time period I used was from 1994 through 2019. Now, why did I pick 94?
7-round draft.
That's the first year the NFL had a 7-round draft. It was 8 rounds the year before. It was more than that before that. So I started with the 7-round draft. I stopped at 2019 because rather than go in and say, hey, what's a bust? Define a bust. Who's a bust? Right? That's quite not subjective. It's quite, impressionable as to who a bust is, who a bust isn't. I said, well, there's probably an easier way. Let's say who's not a bust. That's easier to figure out. And then by simple math, you can deduce who's the bust. And who's not a bust, I determined, was somebody that made it into their 5th year, that second contract. Now, as I said, Christian Ponder did not. He was 4 and done. That was it. He did not make it into the 5th year. And I call it the 5th year second contract. It could be a 5th year option, but it's the team determining they want you beyond that initial rookie commitment. And if you make it past that, you're not a bust. The team says, we want you. You are not a bust. Now, whether you lived up to the high billing of, hey, we're going to take you all the way to the Super Bowl, That's a totally different story. But if you're going into your 5th year with a team, you're not a bust. You've done enough that they're pleased with you to keep going. So, not a bust. Now, wanted to go over all the numbers. You can see it there. And I know you're saying, Dave, we can't see shit. It's tiny as fuck. That, pardon my French, that's true. And I will make available on YouTube a full-size one so you can read it. We'll go through. Got to catch up to my notes. I've got Jordan Love up there. Jordan Love, 2019. He hasn't played his 5th year, but he was included along with the other, there's 1 or 2 other quarterbacks in 2019, because we know they're playing their 5th year this year. So they were included. Just wanted to include him to show you that. So they are going. Now, given the relatively short lifespan of an NFL player, which is only 3.5 years, you figure quarterbacks would fall in that sort of same deal, that same realm. And less than 50% of them wouldn't make their second contract. And when we did the numbers, guess what? That's exactly correct. So, let's see. I made this graph, and it shows all 310 quarterbacks were drafted during this time period. 247 of them made their team, which is good. The bunch that did not, between that 247 and 310, they're automatic bust because they didn't make the team. They stunk. And they are indicated on this graph in that top red jaggedy bar. And hopefully you could see this. The left-hand side, I know.
People are glad Jordan Love is off the screen.
Yep. Left-hand side is first round, and then it goes second round, third round, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. Now, it's burning your eyes. But we found out that's a survival rate of 47.42%, just under 50. Now, I also wanted to get into how many teams got to their second, or how many players got to their second contract, and how many players got to the Super Bowl as part of this analysis. So we're going to continue. The biggest number one bust you've all seen, Jamarcus Russell. He was horrible. He lasted just 3 years before he was done. Number one draft pick in 2007. Lasted 3 years and he was done. There was 2 first rounders taken in 2007 and they both failed. But Jamarcus Russell, because he was drafted number 1, is the biggest bust in the history of the NFL at the quarterback position. Now we're going to get to, you'll see this chart at the end. This is a whole chart. I added a little brief deal. I didn't want to show you that quite right. We're going to see the same chart, just different highlights. 247 teams, or 247 players made their teams. We're going to break down data by round. In the first round, 68 quarterbacks were drafted, and all of them made their team. However, only 52 made their second contract. So that's a difference of 16 did not make their second contract. Christian Ponder was one of those. Jamarcus Russell was obviously one of those. I also wanted to indicate who was the primary starters, Because PFR can show me if a player started at least 3 years of his career was the primary starter, I wanted to mark out of all these quarterbacks being drafted, who were the primary starters. 49 of the quarterbacks achieved that. They were the primary starters. And they went on to, be that for many years. This is out of the first round only. 14 of them made the Super Bowl. Now, you want to keep that number in your head, 14. The success rate begins to dip once we get to the second round, and you can see that. Second round quarterbacks, 27 got picked in the second round, which is 2/3 of what did in the first. 26 made their team. One did not. I did not look to see who that was, but one did not. And only 20 got extended into their fifth season. So we're dropping, and you can see that drop on this graph. I talk about the ski slope effect. They're starting to drop. The number of quarterbacks that were primary starters out of the second round dropped further to only 11. We're talking about 25 years, and there's only 11 starters that came out of the second round for quarterbacks versus the first round, which had 49. Only 3 out of the second round made it to a Super Bowl. Now, I'm not saying winning a Super Bowl. I said made it to a Super Bowl. They played in one. So that's the second round. Then we continue as it drops in the third round. Only 32 quarterbacks were drafted during that time, 20 of which made their fifth season, and only 2 played in the Super Bowl. As you can see, we've got colors down there. I will add the Super Bowl colors at the bottom. And then we get to the fourth round. Fourth round, 40 quarterbacks were drafted. It's one of the bigger rounds. 16, only 16 made it to their fifth season. 5 as the primary starter. That includes Dak Prescott and the clone of Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins. They were 2 of the 5. Then we get into, and none, 0, nada, made it to the Super Bowl out of the fourth round. That brings us to the fifth round. Fifth round, we saw 36 quarterbacks drafted. Only 10 of that 36 made it to their fifth season. None, another made it to the Super Bowl. I don't think Jaron Hall's going to be the first. Be nice, but I don't think it's going to be he's going to be the first. Now we're going to get into the seventh round. Or the sixth round. Sixth round is the anomaly. This is when teams start to go, all right, we've been through the top, the middle, we've let the middle go. Let's see if we can find a flyer in the sixth. They do it in the sixth and the seventh, but this is the hope and pray spot of the draft. There were 54 quarterbacks drafted in the sixth round. 18 making it to their fifth season. And 2 to the Super Bowl. Can you name them?
Well, Tom Brady is one, obviously.
The GOAT. Without a doubt, the GOAT is the most famous, and he is an aberration to how the ski slope works. He is the exception.
But
And the other
always use
one
a shining example of
could
like
be.
how you can find a quarterback late.
Yep. And the other one was Matt Hasselbeck, who lost to the Steelers in the Super Bowl. So those are the only two out of that round. Now, you can see it all here. It slopes down, and if you look at the yellow, the blue, the green, you can see it relatively keeps there, except for the blip in the 6th round where they do the Hail Mary and was much bumped by those two quarterbacks. And then we go to the 7th. We dive further into the later rounds, and it continues to dwindle once again. There were 53 quarterbacks picked in the 7th. Only 11 made it to their 5th season, and only three out of this 25-year period made it to primary starters, and none made it to the Super Bowl. Brock Purdy will eventually be put into that in a few years. Once he gets to his 5th year, he will bump that up into the 7th. But he's the only one. And he's another fluke when it comes to the system. It's real simple. Once you start looking at this chart, obviously you have a better chance drafting early than you do in the later rounds. Now, can it happen? Anything can happen. Tom Brady's proven that. Brock Purdy proved it this year. They got to the Super Bowl. Tom Brady won a shit ton of them. But most of them do not. And Delton says, look at all that green. Yes, look at all that green. They made it to their 2nd contract, but they did not become starters. That should say something. That means they're backups. Do we want a backup on the Minnesota Vikings? We need a good backup on the Minnesota Vikings. We think we have one already. I think a backup is relatively easy to find. Dan, 7 Super Bowls is an anomaly for where it was selected. He's the greatest. He's the GOAT. I don't do that. But to be picked in the 7th or in the 6th round was an anomaly. Nobody thought he was that good. I mean, he came out of Michigan and everybody's like, eh. And he turned into being that good. Now, we're not done. We're going to get to one more section. The top 10. Remember when I said 14 first-rounders made it to the Super Bowl? There were a grand total of 43 players over that 25-year time period, 43 quarterbacks drafted in the top 10. 10 of them made it to the Super Bowl. 10. Just in that top 10, more people made it from the Super Bowl than in any other single round. And I'd have to do the math. 3, 2, more than any other round combined. Just out of the top 10. Now, this suggests, while a high draft position may offer an initial advantage to long-term success in the NFL, which it does, that was 10 out of 43, which means that it's not all just about draft placement and where you get it, but there's other factors involved. It's, how does that quarterback fit into that team? He may be drafted high, but does he go to the shittiest team in the league that can't find their backside with their elbow? Or are they going into a nice setup with a good coach that knows how to develop somebody? All those factors come into play. So you got to think about that when you're drafting. But it's pretty damn clear from the numbers where you want to target the draft to have your best opportunity to succeed. Now, I know there's folks that watch this show that say, oh, no. Moving up in the draft, it's too much. We should never do that. We don't need to pay that much. We've already lost value on our trades. It's too much. I understand that thought. But if you're going to go that route and you're hoping for what New England did with Tom Brady, you're hoping for that prayer, that anomaly, that golden BB that found you. The goose, right? However you want to say it, you're hoping for that lottery ticket that you just bought and hope hits on the $800 million prize. Well, I would bet, now I know the odds for the lottery is probably a little bit higher, but it probably feels the same if you're trying to get a quarterback in the later rounds and hoping that he's the guy versus taking your best bet and moving up and drafting in the top 10. Now, the Minnesota Vikings have done this their entire existence. They were established in 1961, and they were looking for the quarterback anomaly, the one found further down that could make it all happen. Now, they got close. They got close with Joe Kapp. They got close with Fran Tarkenton, and Fran Tarkenton was absolutely awesome. And when he retired, he led the league in all quarterback categories. They got to the Super Bowl, and that's all I'm tracking here is getting to the Super Bowl. But as we all know, they did not win. And that was a much, much different time in the NFL. A lot fewer teams. The game was played different. It was more defense-based, more run-based. It's not as air-centric, passing-centric as it is today. Well, again, do you go with the hope and pray like Seattle did with Matt Hasselbeck back in the day? I don't know. This is one of those rare chances where the Vikings have an opportunity to draft in the top 10. As our buddy Ted Glover says, he listed all the times we've drafted in the top 10. Not a single one did we take a quarterback, but all the times we drafted in the top 10. And as you can see from 1970 on, we had some pretty good teams. Or at least mediocre teams, because we weren't in the top 10. So that to me is the key. Your best opportunity to grab that quarterback with the best chance is the one in the top 10. If that costs moving up, you move up. But if you want the opportunity with the best odds, 10 out of 43, you move on up. And that was the deep dive. And I'm sorry I rattled off a whole bunch of numbers. Like I say, I'll put them in the comment section. But that they go there. What do you think, Darren?
Yeah, Dave, I've over the past couple of months, again, thanks everybody for the comments there. Quite a few people, I think Delton said it, Riley said it, a few others have said it, where at some point you got to take your shot. You gotta say, I believe in this guy. I believe he can be our franchise quarterback. This is the guy that can do it, and we're gonna do whatever it takes to get it within some reason. Like, you don't want to pull a Herschel Walker trade, also been referenced in the comments here, but you there's going to be a quarterback tax you're going to have to pay to move up, and you have to be willing to accept that. And so that is the situation facing the Vikings this year. Now, Dave, I'm kind of more of a conservative guy in the draft picks. I love draft picks. I like to have a lot of them. And to have 2 first rounders, that is just like excellent to me. That means we could get 2 really good players at 2 really premium positions. And it's really been tempting of me to say, especially the JJ McCarthy thing, where here's a guy, I've said it a couple of weeks ago, 2 months ago, there was some question whether he was even a first rounder.
Everybody thought he was second.
Yeah. And now he's like not going to get past, pick 6 or 7. And wow. So to me, like, is McCarthy really so much better than Bo Nix or Michael Penix that you're going to trade both your number ones this year to move up to 5 or 6 or 4 to get him? And maybe you got to give up a number 1 next year too, and maybe some other later round picks to get him. I don't know about that, but I'm going to trust Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell, who know a gazillion times more about football and quarterback evaluation, and their front office and their scouts do as well than I do. So if they believe in that McCarthy is their guy, I can live with that. And the stats that you put out there, Dave, just kind of drives home. I am surprised by this. By the numbers. And it does say that, hey, if you're going to take a shot, and this looks like the year where the Vikings have the draft capital to do it, and they have the need, a serious need at quarterback, then yes, it's pretty clear that your best shot to get the quarterback of the future is to trade into the top 10. And this year, you're probably going to have to trade into the top 5 to do it. And so if the Vikings do that, even if they give up 2 firsts this year and 1 next year, I am going to be fine with that. I would have wished, especially if it was McCarthy, I would have wished we could have got him at 11 so we could get like somebody else at 23, whether it's Jared Verse or whoever, a defensive tackle, a cornerback, somebody else. But I'm going to be good with that because your numbers show picking a guy in the top 10, that's your best odds of finding the guy who can take you to the Super Bowl and win it.
And that's our goal. I thought, as Vikings fans.
The odds aren't great. Some of these guys that are going to get picked this year, Drake May, they're going to be busts, just like Christian Ponder was. It happens every year. Sometimes all the guys picked in the first round are busts. But this seems like a year the talent is deep enough at the quarterback position and good enough at it that the Vikings have to take their shot. And I think they're going to try their damnedest to do it. And if they do, what they give up, unless it's like 25 first rounders, I'm hugely exaggerating. I'm going to be okay with it. I'm going to be okay with it. And I'm going to be happy because we've taken our shot to get where the Kansas City Chiefs are, where the San Francisco 49ers were this year, even though they didn't draft they thought they drafted a franchise quarterback 3 years ago, Trey Lance.
And they made a move. They failed. And then they got lucky, and they've got the second anomaly or third anomaly ever to be beyond, this third round ever making it to the third round ever making it to the Super Bowl. So it is what it is. I'm just saying that's the way to go if you want the highest odds of hitting. Anything could happen in like San Francisco, last man in the draft, and they hit. That's amazing. New England, having a good starter in Drew Bledsoe, drafts, what they considered possibly a backup, and he turns into the greatest quarterback that ever lived to date. So it does happen. It's just, I'm saying, the higher the odds gives you the better chance. And there's a lot of quarterbacks in that 14 out of the first round and that 10 out of the top 10 that made it to the Super Bowl and played, and a bunch of them won. So to me, that's why I think we need to move up and grab who we want. And I hope they do that, because there's no guarantee next year's class is going to be anywhere near as close as this one's.
No.
And I think they have a hard-on for at least 2 of the players, 2 of the quarterbacks up there. So,
and are we really going to sit around and watch Sam Darnold be our starting quarterback all of 2024 if we don't go for a young guy. We may, depending on who it is, that may be the case anyway, which is going to be a very painful year for all of us, I think. But yes, 2025. I don't follow much college football, but I don't even know who is the top-rated quarterback in the 2025 class right
you
now.
Got Ewers out of Texas and Shedeur Sanders are the two big names.
Do any of those two really excite you?
No, not like this class.
No.
Like this class. Delton,
so this is the year to do it.
Delton had said Penix is moving up in the conversation, and I said it all months ago at the beginning of this. You're going to get flavors of the week or the month, and they're going to move up and they're going to move down, and then they're going to move up, and they're going to be different than they were a couple months ago than what it ends up when we come to the draft. And yes, Michael Penix's stock seems to be moving up. Now, does he get into the top 10? I don't know. That's going to be interesting.
But J.J. McCarthy is this year's Anthony Richardson to me, where somebody who wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the top 10, and then the momentum just kept building, and then all of a sudden you've got a guy you're trading up for and selecting in the top 5.
Mm-hmm. So it is it. Well, that's that, folks. Like I said, I will in the YouTube comment section or whatever it is, I will post these so you can take them and blow them up. So we'll see. Ridiculous if we have a crappy season, we could be giving up top 10, 25 first round or 2. Stupid. We'll see.
It's a risk. And again, your scouting staff does your due diligence, which they do. If you think that this class is the cat's ass, and there's a guy that you really want and you believe in, then you make that deal. But it is a risk. And said earlier in the comment section, way earlier, is that this is going to be the selection. Whatever Kwesi Adofo-Mensah does here, and Kevin O'Connell is going to be tied to it as well. This is a career maker or breaker for both of them, because if they fuck it up, they will be gone in 2 or 3 years, guaranteed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So
particularly O'Connell, because his team will suck, and the GM will be looking for a scapegoat, and
yep.
and it'll be
exactly. So I think they got to go for it. I think it makes sense. We're within striking range. We're not going from 23 last year all the way up to 2 or 3 or whatever it was, and giving the entire farm, the pigs and the cows and everything else that was reported that we were given. So we'll see. I think the Pats are asking for too much, but how much of that is posturing as well? We'll find out once it comes Thursday night, day 1 of the draft, if not before. So that brings us to theme 3. Here we're continuing the breakdown by position group, and this week we're doing the corners.
We're getting down to the last few positional units, Dave, in our off-season positional analysis. Again, didn't get this done because I was away in Costa Rica for a couple of weeks. We didn't get this done before free agency started. So
I know, your life was rough.
Yeah, it was tough. Tough there for sure. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for the sympathy. But yes, corners. I'm going to talk about them. Free agency has, again, made it a little bit clearer how this positional unit is going to look. And with the cornerback situation, a unit that I think is still a weakness for the Vikings, was a weakness in 2023, and it's not looking particularly strong in 2024 yet. And it's a unit that the corners... Last year, our defensive coordinator, Brian Flores, did not have a whole lot of confidence in our cornerbacks, I would say, because he often only had 2 of them on the field. And in the NFL these days, almost you're regularly running your 3 corners, 2 outside guys and a nickel. That's your base pretty much for the vast majority of teams. And on a lot of defensive snaps, you've got 4 or even 5 corners on the field to cover with all those fast-moving wide receivers that teams are using. Brian Flores did not do that last year again. A lot of times we only had 2 corners on the field, and his base had 3 safeties. Sometimes he even had 4 safeties. Three cornerbacks was not used nearly as much as you see in the NFL. So I think that's not something that he preferred. I think that was out of necessity. I just don't think he trusted our corner room and the depth there. And he thought that the safeties actually were a better fit for the defensive schemes he was running and would give us a better chance of success on the defensive side of the ball than putting up 3 or 4 corners.
Well, he even reverted to running a zone on the back end of a blitz that normally you're running man-to-man on, because he did not have the players he exactly wanted or with the talent that he wants in place. He was doing things that had never been done before last year to make us competitive, and he did.
He did. But I think there's definitely some work to do still with the Vikings cornerback room, and they already did some of it in free agency. The big quote unquote signing was Shaquille Griffin. Shaquille Griffin. I think I said Griffin. I don't know where I'm getting the Irish in there.
The Irish leftover St. Paddy's Day.
And I think first glance at that, and it was like, oh, Shaquille Griffin, pretty good player. Nice little signing. We got him. His salary cap hit is about $4.3 million right now for 1 year. Not bad. He made the Pro Bowl in 2019. He has been a good player, but 2019 in NFL years is like,
especially for a corner.
Yeah, is ages ago. Things haven't been so good for him the past couple of years. 2022, he was injured a lot with Jacksonville. They cut him. He re-signed with Houston up there, played quite a bit while Derek Stingley Jr. was injured. When Derek Stingley Jr. came back, they released him. Then he got picked up by the Panthers. So my question with Griffin, even though I liked the signing because it didn't cost a lot, it's 1 year, and Griffin has been a very good player in this league. My question is, what kind of Shaquille Griffin are you getting right now? He turns 29 during the season, I think in the summer, actually. So he's getting a little bit up there for a corner. So yes, I think, not a whole lot of money spent on Griffin, but he is a guy who's getting a bit older, and he has bounced around a bit the past couple of years. So financially wise, not much risk there, but I don't think it's a guarantee that you're going to get the Shaquille Griffin from 2019 by signing him now. And I think that, even so, his PFF grade last year was okay. It was 67. So it's solid, but not very good in a very good realm. But he's definitely, with the way the Vikings cornerback room is right now, Griffin, he's had 83 career starts. He's been a good player in the past. He's not causing you much. And he's a guy that I think is certainly going to compete for a starting spot on the outside. Probably he's the favorite to start opposite Byron Murphy right now on the outside. But I don't think it's guaranteed. But the reason that he would be the odds-on favorite is that he's likely the replacement for Caleb Evans going into his third year. And Evans is a guy who I don't like as a player. His PFF grade last year was 55, which is pretty poor. That matches what I saw on the field. I think he's a very passive corner. He's quite content to let passes get caught in front of him and then try to rally up and tackle. And he's not even a very good tackler. Doesn't make a lot of plays on the ball. You like his size, 6'2". He's about probably around 200 pounds, maybe a bit more. So he's got the size, but he just hasn't shown the playmaking ability, the attacking the ball, the coverage ability to be a starting corner in the league. Last year he was a starter kind of by default. Didn't do very well. Got benched the last couple of games in the year. So I think that he's a guy that Griffin will beat him out as a starter, and that puts a Caleb Evans on the sidelines, which is where I think he belongs. Back at him. Now, the guy who likely will start opposite of Shaquille Griffin will be Byron Murphy. Last year, one of our top free agent signings. His PFF grade was only 57, so they didn't think much of his play last year either. I thought Murphy was, I don't think he killed us, but I don't think he was all that great either. But I find often with free agent signings is that the first year, sometimes they have a hard time. They don't make the impact you're hoping for. Second year, they kind of more hit their stride, kind of like what Jordan Hicks did last year with the Vikings. His first year I thought was poor. Last year was pretty good, and was actually very good. I'm hoping the same thing happens with Murphy. He's been a quality player in the past with the Arizona Cardinals. He's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. And I think a second year in Minnesota, second year under Brian Flores' system, there's you can feel positive that he's going to have a better year in 2024 than he did in 2023, particularly if things change as to how the Vikings do their coverages and whether they're playing man-to-man or zone. Murphy's been a guy who, when we signed him, he was billed as, well, he's a man that's man-to-man, man press. That's what he's good at. And of course, we didn't play much of that at all last year.
Out of necessity.
Yeah, out of necessity. So I think Murphy's definitely one of your three guys. You're starting outside corner. There has been talk that he'll move into slot a fair bit. We could see that.
Even Coach O'Connell mentioned that.
Yeah. But sometimes the things that the coach mentions don't always pan out during the regular season. Mekhi Blackmon last year, he actually was the best rated corner on PFF that we had. He had a 71.3 season grade. I really liked Blackmon last year. Really sticky in coverage, makes plays on the ball, not afraid to attack the ball. And he's always going to struggle in as far as with 50-50 balls against bigger wide receivers and getting boxed out. Prime example was the touchdown pass that Cortland Sutton caught on him to win the game last year in Denver. I think we remember that, where he just out-jumped and then boxed out little Mekhi. But I think Mekhi Blackmon is played really well last year. He just didn't play a lot, but he's going to have a larger role this year in this defense, I think, and he could emerge as our best corner if he progresses with the way he progresses and improves on what he did in 2023. I feel good about Mekhi Blackmon, and I think he's going to have a larger role, and he should have a larger role, barring injuries. But after those four guys, you got Andrew Booth Jr., Jawan Williams, and then Jalen Williams, who's was an undrafted rookie free agent last year and ended up playing a bit at the end of the season because we had some injury problems. Murphy was out, and Caleb Evans had gotten benched. But that's not a whole lot of great depth. I think, Jawan Williams bounced around a lot. Jalen Williams is an undrafted rookie free agent. And then Andrew Booth Jr. is a guy, second round draft picked, was highly regarded when we got him, was considered a first rounder. We thought we kind of got a steal getting him in the second round. He had a strong start to training camp in 2023, but it just hasn't happened for him. He's actually moved down in the depth chart compared to his rookie season, and he's barely been able to get on the field except by bare necessity when we've had injuries or ineffectiveness, and they've just thrown him in there. He's been a big disappointment. This is a big year for him. I think it's a big year for Caleb Evans, but for Booth Jr., the opportunity is there to move up the depth chart. We're not that strong at corner. A Caleb Evans, even Mekhi Blackmon, he could leapfrog them if he could play up to his potential, but we have not seen that in 2 seasons. And you're going to see he's going to get a lot of play in training camp. He's going to play a lot in preseason. If he does not perform, I wouldn't be surprised if he is trade bait at the end of preseason, depending on how our cornerback room looks. But big year for
it could be trade bait for us moving up to grab our quarterback.
Maybe. So that's how the cornerback room looks right now. And I think draft wise, I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is going to target a cornerback. We do need to add depth and talent there. And the thing is, of course, is with the way things are looking, we're probably just going to have one pick the first 2 days of the draft. So if you're going at corner, it's going to be day 3. We do have 2 4ths. We do have 2 5ths. We do have 2 7ths. I think 4th, 5th round, again, that is where I think you could see Kwesi Adofo-Mensah target a corner with some that he likes. And the good news there is that if you look at depth charts around the NFL and you look at their top 3 or 4 corners, there are a ton of guys who were picked in the 3rd round, the 4th round, the 5th round, undrafted. It's not like quarterback. You can find good corners, Mike Hilton, DJ Reed from the Giants. I could go on and on. Guys who were not picked in the first round and who have turned out to be really good NFL players. So that's the good news for the Vikings. You can find really good corners later in the draft, and we have 7 picks on day 3. So I think we're going to target for them. And there's some guys, I think for the Vikings, you want to pay attention to guys that played at the Senior Bowl and the East-West Shrine Bowl played corner as potential targets for us, because Caleb Evans was at the Senior Bowl, and so was Mekhi Blackman, and we took both of those guys. And I think that, some guys to look out for. You've got him pictured: Kyrie Jackson from Oregon, 6'2", long press man guy. Nehemiah Pritchard from Auburn, up there now. Cam Hart from Notre Dame. Those are 3 guys that were at the Senior Bowl. We know that the Vikings had their coaches there. They had their scouts there. Our Tyler Fornes would have got a good look at these guys as well. So these guys are not projected to go in the first round, second round. They're considered day 3 picks. So they could be available in the 4th round when we've got the draft capital to select them. So keep an eye on them. Another guy to keep an eye on is, you wouldn't have probably heard of him. He has never played college football, but he's the CFL Defensive Rookie of the Year last year, Quantez Stiggers. Never played college. Interesting backstory, but the Vikings actually had him in for a top 30 visit recently. And so he's a potential guy that you could be looking at on day 3, later in day 3, to add to the cornerback room. But really, the Vikings, I think they need to add depth at cornerback, and I think that they're going to try to do it on day 3. I guess the question is, with the Vikings, their drafting of cornerbacks and getting quality cornerbacks that they drafted is pretty spotty for a long time. Like if you go back to whether it's Trey Waynes, Marcus McCauley, Cedric Griffin, guys like Jeff Gladney, we have not really done very well drafting cornerbacks, no matter what round it's been, other than Xavier Rhodes. So, but Kwesi adofo-mensah, Andrew Booth Jr. does not look good. Caleb Evans does not look good. Mekhi Blackman, a different story. So maybe he's turning things around a bit. But it's time for the Vikings scouting department to start nailing their draft picks when they pick corners and not whiffing on so many. And I think we're going to see them take a shot at least one and in the day 3 of this year's draft to add to our cornerback room.
We have 9 presently on the roster. Most of them are backups, obviously. And then you have the Flash, the special teams ace. He's listed as a corner, but he's purely special teams. I expect that they will probably try to get at least 12 going into camp. That would be 4 full squads. What was that? We need to find a Carl Lee. Yes.
Carl Lee.
Absolutely.
And I think Carl Lee, back in the 12-round era, was that 7th or 8th rounder. He was like way, way down there. And he was a stud.
They do exist. It's like wide receivers that you find some guy in the 5th, Diggs, and he turns into a Pro Bowler.
Yes.
They're that type of player. Very similar, just obviously defenders can't catch the ball. Or they'd be wide receivers. That's hopefully we do. We could use good ones, lockdown ones, ones that we could trust going on. But I do think you are correct. I think Murphy obviously is going to be starting. I think Blackman and I think Griffin will be your 3 starting quarterbacks, with Murphy moving into the quote nickel role for the most part. Even though we had Metellus play there a lot last year, I think they want to have a corner capable of playing it as well and not have to have Murphy on the outside because they don't have anybody else. So, good breakdown. Very, very good breakdown. But I think Murphy's going to be the key. Hopefully he returns to playing better, like you said. We'll find out.
Yeah, and the Vikings cornerback room, I consider it weakness right now, but if Murphy improves in year 2, if Blackman continues to build on his strong rookie season, if Shaquille Griffin is your 2019 Shaquille Griffin and not 2023 Shaquille Griffin, then this and Evans somehow gets it and starts playing up to more of his potential and what he showed at the Senior Bowl in 2022 when he turned a lot of heads, and that's one of the reasons the Vikings picked him when they did, was because he had a strong Senior Bowl. I think, then the secondary could be a strength, not a weakness. But that's a lot of ifs, Dave. A lot of ifs.
Mm-hmm. And we got to hope for a lot of those ifs to hit, because we're not going to have a lot of draft choices to throw at it with going for the quarterback. So we'll find out. Delton says he thinks the offensive line is the weakest by far. I disagree with that, but I also disagree with you saying 80% of first-round quarterbacks are busts. And I thought I proved that today, that's not even close. So with that brings us to the end of the show. And I want to thank everybody for showing up today. Great conversation in the remarks. And like I said, if you want to follow great mock drafter, you need to follow Yogi. Zoe's in here as well. He does a fantastic show. Those are all you can join and watch. I'm going to go watch my buddies Ted and Drew because I missed this weekend's show. I'm going to catch it next and hopefully get some laughs from that. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. And if you are in the line of total eclipse, be safe tomorrow. Make sure you have your proper glasses. And hopefully it isn't too cloudy and raining like it's supposed to be here, but we'll find out. And thanks, Norsevius. Yes, always hit that like, subscribe, ring the bell, share it with your friends and enemies, because we like growing, and we think we have a pretty good podcast here with two wise old bloggers who like to put in their 2 bits. Darren, any last words?
No words, baby. Just SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!